you ready?
And welcome into our Charter Road Hospitality Studios here at Town Place Suites in Oxford. I'm Browning Stubbs with Michael Snowden. This is the 2015-2016 Episode 2 of Hotty Toddy Hotline. And Michael, we got a big show to talk about today. 76 points scored by the Ole Miss football team. They defeated the Skyhawks of UT Martin 76-3, and boy, was it impressive.
It was. I'm looking forward to talking about it. Big-time win for the Rebels.
We will talk much more about the Ole Miss UT Martin game, how the Rebels scored 76 points. I mean, Michael, I don't care who you play. 76 points is pretty impressive, but we'll talk about the offense, talk about Robert Camdici dominated on defense for the Rebels. A couple players were suspended for the game. We'll talk about that. Laramie Tunsil had to sit out amidst the NCAA allegations, and we will also talk about some other Ole Miss sports. Ole Miss volleyball off to a great start. Steve McRoberts picked up his 500th win last week for the Rebels. Ole Miss soccer team, they had a very tough game over the weekend against the 19th ranked Central Florida Knights. We'll talk about that. And we'll also look around the SEC. A lot of the SEC teams, Michael, did very well over the weekend, but one lost. And we will get to that and much more later in the show. But you want to stick around. First, game recap of the season right here on Hotty Toddy Hotline, and we will bring it to you when we come back. Stick with us on Hotty Toddy Hotline.
Hey, Rebels, your truck is here. Allen Samuels Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram in Oxford presents the all-new Ram Rebel. It's Ram, the Rebel way. Send an unmistakable signal. Rebel 24/7. Ram Rebel from your friend in the car business. Allen Samuels Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram in Oxford.
Come by, let's be friends.
And welcome back into Hotty Toddy Hotline. Browning Stubbs with Michael Snowden here. Michael, let's talk some Ole Miss football. Ole Miss defeats UT Martin 76-3, and let's talk about the quarterback play. We'll break it down position by position for you guys. Chad Kelly, first start as an Ole Miss Rebel, looked very impressive. His stats for the game: Chad Kelly was 9 of 15 with 211 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. That 1 interception was not his fault. Laquan Treadwell dropped the football on that play, but he threw a couple of deep balls that were just incredible, particularly the one to Markel Pack for 57 yards.
Yep. I mean, it was good seeing Chad Kelly out there. He looked comfortable in the system that he was playing in. Again, as you mentioned, that deep ball. That's something Bo Wallace didn't have.
Right.
No hit on Bo, but I mean, Chad's got a strong arm, and he will. It seems like he knows he's throwing the right reads. He's looking for the receivers well. Hit Laquan pretty well. Hit everybody really well, and he impressed me. He really did.
He did, Michael. And Chad Kelly, I thought he was very mobile. Running in and outside of the pocket, and overall, I just thought that he's the perfect fit for this Ole Miss offense. I mean, he's got a cannon, and also, I mean, it seemed like he was very enthusiastic. He communicated well with his players, and even after the game, I spoke with him in the locker room, and he said, "They're my brothers." I feel like he said the word brothers like 10 times, but it was pretty funny. But Chad Kelly, he loves his teammates. Michael,
yep. He
looked very comfortable in Hugh Freeze's offense, and the remaining question is this: Ryan Buchanan and Devontae Kincaid also played well.
They did.
But Chad Kelly seemed to have had the upper hand. So will Hugh Freeze, Michael, in your opinion, do you think he will let Chad be the full-time starter for Fresno State, or do you think he'll still experiment with playing 3 quarterbacks?
I said it on our last show last year last time I came on. Chad was going to be the guy. I still believe it. I mean, Brian and Devontae did both play well. I just don't see them taking that starting spot. Maybe get a little more playing time against Fresno State next week, but when it comes Bama time in 2 weeks, it's going to be Chad Kelly. He's going to have to. I think he's got the step, and I think he's going to have that starting job.
I think so too, Michael. I mean, there were a couple times in the game where he tried to connect with Laquan Treadwell. Laquan still a little rusty, but
seems like it.
Yeah, I mean, he obviously he dropped 1 or 2 footballs, but overall, Laquan will get back to that level in just a few short weeks. Now, let's talk about the running game, Michael.
It was interesting.
Jalen Walden, started the game. I believe it was on the first series.
Yeah.
Jalen Walden rushed for a 60-yard touchdown run. And, Michael, it's going to be key to have the running game be a success this season.
Absolutely. I mean, Jalen Walton got that huge running touchdown, and he obviously got one long one against State last year. But, if you're not going to play teams like UT Martin every week. I mean, you're just not. Your odds are Jalen Walton is not going to have that big of a hole against Alabama. So they're going to have to just find ways to break through. Offensive line's got to really help out Jalen, and Jalen's got to take advantage of the chances that he's got, and we're going to have to see what they can do. It's going to have to happen. Having Chad giving the long ball is helpful, gives another threat, and that opens up opportunities for Jalen. If he can work with what he's got, running game can improve a lot.
Jalen Walden finished this game with 3 carries for 65 yards, also had a 4-yard touchdown run as well. I think it's safe to assume that he should get more than 3 carries every game.
I would hope so. I mean, you can't win, playing one way the entire game. I mean, it's just not going to happen. But
and Michael, it wasn't just Jalen Walden doing work for the running backs. It was
right.
Eugene Brasley, 6 carries for 88 yards. DK Buford, 4 carries, 65 yards. Akeem Judd, 11 carries, 52 yards. And Jordan Wilkins, 6 carries, 41 yards. They have 5 capable running backs, Michael, that I think all could potentially play in a lot of these games. Overall, I mean, we know Jalen is the number 1 guy.
Yeah.
Who do you think should get the second most carries on the team?
It remains to be seen. Whoever breaks through and wants to take the opportunity. We've got a couple of different running backs. Jordan Wilkins did not really impress me last year, or honestly on Saturday, as big as he is. But it remains to be seen. I think it's a wide-open competition for that second back right now.
And what I like about Jordan Wilkins, Michael, is I feel like him and DK Buford are the biggest backs on the team.
Right.
Ole Miss is going to have to run in between the tackles this season, something they did not do last year. They ranked at the bottom half of the SEC in rushing yards per game on a pretty solid offensive line led by Laramie Tunsil. So if Ole Miss is going to be successful, Michael, they've got to, grind more and just run through that strong offensive line.
They will. The offensive line is pretty talented this year. You've got a couple of experienced guys on there, including Ben Still and Laramie, and hopefully things work out with Laramie pretty soon, gets back on the field before Alabama game comes along. But, they've got a solid team.
Let's talk about the wide receivers, Michael. The wide receivers, there was a joint effort, with Laquan Treadwell, Quincy Adebojo, Cody Core, Markel Pack, even saw some DeMaurier Stringfellow. But before we touch on all of those guys, let's talk about Robert Kimdichie on the opposite side of the ball. Robert Kimdichie went out on a swing pass, caught a 31-yard touchdown, and it was from Ryan Buchanan. It was just incredible. And what impressed me was his speed. I mean, he tippy-toed down that sideline, went untouched. I mean, he's a beast on that play.
Well, maybe you can see something we didn't know Robert has, an offensive game. I mean, maybe that can be a power halfback, parting running back. But that was impressive. If you're the number 1 overall recruit in the nation, and he shows it day in, day out, it was very surprising. Also, back to the wide receivers, we got to see DeMarcus Lodge, the freshman out of Texas from last year's recruiting class, get a touchdown late in the game, which was good to see too.
And I was surprised that he played. I thought he was going to be redshirted.
Well, apparently he is, but got in the game. So that's what they said, the redshirt freshman with the touchdown. So good to see DeMarcus get out there and show us what he's got. It was a good catch too. I mean, he went up and got that ball. It was impressive.
And it's not just him, but also in the future, almost will have Van Jefferson, a wide receiver. A lot of strong.
Kalen Metcalf.
Yeah, perfect. And I think Ole Miss in the future, I think that for recruits, it's going to be a place to come if you want to be a good wide receiver.
Oh yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, we've shown, Laquan Treadwell. I mean, our receivers they make plays. I mean, Evan Ingram, he's a tight end, obviously, but Cody Core, they've all shown what they can do. They really have.
We're going to take a break, but when we return on Hotty Toddy Hotline, we're going to talk about the defensive side of the ball and what things went well in the Rebels' 76-3 victory over UT Martin. Stay with us. We'll be right back on Hotty Toddy Hotline. And welcome back into Hotty Toddy Hotline, Brown and Suggs with Michael Snowden. Let's talk about the defensive side of the ball, Michael. Ole Miss, only gave up 3 points. That field goal came in the second half. But overall, a very impressive defensive effort from the Ole Miss Rebels. There were blocked field goals. There were sacks. It was just truly an all-around slugfest out there.
It really was. I mean, they played so well. I mean, and you expected this against UT Martin. The Land Sharks doing what they do, going out, and it looked like it could have been a shutout for a very long time out there. But the defense did look fantastic, and I'm looking forward to seeing what else they can do this season.
Overall, I mean, we saw that blocked field goal by Robert Kimdichie, and he also had several tackles as well.
Yes.
And what Robert said after the game was his mom, who was a government official in Nigeria, got to see him play for the first time in 2 years.
Really?
She was in town over the weekend, and Coach Freeze in his press conference said that offensive play was designed for his mother, to see him, score on offense. I mean, I think that's a pretty special moment.
I believe, and that's a great thing about Coach Hugh Freeze. He loves his players. He loves the players' family, and when he comes, he in the recruiting pitch, you are family here. Yep. And they clearly are. I mean, they did that specifically for him, and it worked out. And it's just great to see. And the mom, I'm sure, Kimdichie's mother, I'm sure loved seeing it, and that it was a fantastic moment for the whole entire Kimdichie family.
And one other awesome defensive play in the game, Michael, was defensive back Trey Elston returned a 93-yard interception return for touchdown. And, he read the play very well from UT Martin's quarterback. That was Jared Neal that threw the interception. I mean, overall, I mean, that was a pretty solid play. Ran really fast down the sidelines.
Oh yeah, I mean Trey Elson coming in, doing what he does best, just making defensive plays, doing excellent, just all around great. Pick off and took it to the house.
Going to have some good corners and safeties this year with the Ole Miss team. You're going to have T. Shepard out there, Mike Hilton. You said Trey Elston. So Ole Miss should have, if not as good, maybe better than last year's combo with Cody Pruitt and Quez Golson.
Yeah,
Michael, let's touch on some of the controversial topics with the Ole Miss defense. C.J. Hampton, C.J. Johnson were not able to play due to a violation of team rules. After the game, Coach Freeze had said that C.J. will be back for Fresno State, but C.J. Hampton might not be. So I don't know what it could have happened. I mean, obviously we can't really speculate what happened, whether it's grades, a fight,
right,
etc. But thing is, when Ole Miss, their biggest weakness on defense, if not arguably on the whole team, is linebackers.
Right.
You got to have both of those guys playing as many reps as possible for Alabama.
You do. I mean, hopefully C.J. Hampton gets back, and obviously C.J. Johnson will be back. But you need that leadership, you need that experience, and hopefully he'll be back and he'll clear up whatever has happened. And I fully expect for him to be back by the third week of the season for sure.
Now let's talk about one other player that did not play in this game, Michael. And I spoke with a former college football coach, and he told me that Ole Miss should not play Laramie Tunsil until he is cleared.
Yes.
And honestly, that surprised me that the left tackle, projected number one pick in the NFL draft, Laramie Tunsil did not play in this game because I covered SEC Media Days at Hoover, Alabama, Michael, and Freeze was asked the question, will he play in week 1? Freeze said, absolutely. Didn't happen. So
yeah,
why, if Freeze, Laramie, his family, the whole team thinks that he's innocent, why do you think he was held out?
Precautionary, just all precautionary. I mean, if you cooperate with the NCAA and you just show that you're willing to work with them, they'll work with you. But you do, especially against a game like UT Martin or Fresno State, you don't want to take a loss because of a player being part of the game that probably shouldn't have been. But hopefully Laramie is cleared. Hopefully these allegations never happened. Obviously they were from his stepfather. But it'll be interesting to see what happens. As you said, Hugh Freeze said he would play week 1. Didn't. Somewhat cause for concern, but not somewhat for panic. Just curiosity, I think, at the most right now.
They're going to have Laramie Tunsil, in my opinion, for Alabama. I mean,
have to.
Fawn Cooper played the left tackle position. They've got to have Laramie Tunsil for that game. I mean, if Ole Miss is going to have any chance to run through that strong defensive line that Alabama has, they got to have Laramie out there.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question about it. I mean, the upcoming possibly number 1 pick in the draft, a guy that's just huge on the offensive line, and the running game's not that strong anyway as of right now. But you need all the help it can get. And Laramie hopefully is cleared and can get through and can get back out on that field. The Rebels will definitely need him for Bama. As you know, at Bama, you don't just beat Bama. I mean, we saw that for 10 years, and then finally last year broke through. And interesting stat, not one team has gone back-to-back years of beating Bama under Coach Saban. So the Rebels are going to have everybody ready, everybody healthy, and ready to go to beat Alabama.
And in Ole Miss's long football history, they have not beaten Alabama 2 years in a row.
Nope.
I mean, they've only beaten them 6 times in history, but they
last time in Tuscaloosa was in '88.
Yep. And we had on our last week's episode, we had former Ole Miss coach Billy Brewer came on the show, shared his opinions about beating Alabama back in '88. You know, had some great memories for us here on Hotty Toddy Hotline. We'll have Billy back on the show later in our season. So yeah, I mean, we talked about what Ole Miss, you know, what they have to do to be ready for Alabama, and you know, we'll get to Fresno in a little bit here, but
right.
They have got to clean up, you know, these players that are suspended for violation of team rules. You know, hopefully the Tunsil situation will be sorted out by Alabama.
Hopefully so. I mean, that's, again, it has to be done. I mean, you look at what happened last year when we had fewer players. It started with LSU. Denzel Gamdici went down, ended up losing that game 10-7. Other reasons we may have lost that game, but if you're Ole Miss, you got to have everybody. You just have to have everybody, and especially against Alabama, who was mad from last year. Derrick Henry's a monster. And it's going to be a competitive game, but it's a better game too. You want to see Laramie out there, and honestly, as much as Alabama fans probably wouldn't want to say this, you want to see Laramie out there too. Alabama wants to beat Ole Miss at its best. Mm-hmm. They'll make it look better, and that's what the committee looks for. It's what everybody looks for. You want to see everybody out there.
All right, Michael, that wraps up our defensive discussion of the Rebels. When we come back, we'll have a very special guest, Chad LaBorde, our partner with CRM Sports, runs the Louisiana State Roar show, and we will talk to Chad about Ole Miss and all things SEC when we return.
Because you want more flavor, at Nuke's we marinate and grill to perfection. Because you want the latest culinary tastes and trends, we never rest. At Nuke's, great food drives us. So we are meticulous in our preparation, obsessed with the quality of our ingredients, and uncompromising about serving you our very best. We believe that sharing a memorable meal is one of life's ultimate pleasures. Join us at Nuke's Eatery.
Welcome back into Hotty Toddy Hotline. We have a very special guest, Chad LaBorde, who is our partner at CRM Sports, runs the Louisiana State Roar show. Chad, how you doing?
Doing pretty good. Pretty warm, but doing pretty good.
We are warm here in Oxford as well. It was a brutally hot day in Oxford, 90 degrees, and it was I was shooting part of the game on the field for the first quarter, and I went right back up to the press box. I was very hot. All right, Chad, we want to talk to you about Ole Miss, and they had a big win over UT Martin, 76-3. What did you think of the Rebels' performance?
I thought the performance was really good. They did what they were asked to do. Obviously, Tennessee Martin, it's like McNeese State or Eastern Michigan. You can't really gauge a barometer on things. It's probably somewhere in the middle. Same goes when Georgia played UL Monroe yesterday, But I will say this, to score 76 points the way they did and have Robert Kimbichi play the roles he played, which is not surprising. He can obviously get on offense and play the tight end role, and he can certainly do a heck of a job at defensive end. I think Ole Miss is going to surprise some people. I said that before this game, and the 76 points didn't indicate that against Tennessee Martin. I think it's a known fact that if you look at how they played yesterday, they certainly could contend in the SEC West if Chad Kelly stays on a straight and narrow.
Yeah, and Chad Kelly, I thought he was very impressive. He's obviously got to stay, out of trouble. But overall, I thought his deep ball was very impressive for Ole Miss. And, overall, Chad, I want your thoughts on the Ole Miss football team this season. Are there any predictions or anything you'd like to share about the Rebels?
When you look at the Rebels, and you look at, and I'm looking at November because I know LSU comes to Oxford in November. LSU's got 4 games in a row against you could just about say playing the entire division at once, with the exception of Auburn and State, which they would have already faced in September. And Ole Miss gets LSU at the right time. LSU's going to have a bye week before they play Alabama early in November, and then they come back, play Alabama in Tuscaloosa, they play Arkansas and Baton Rouge, and they head to Oxford to play Ole Miss. That's 2 really tough games, I think. Of course, Alabama, we know what they are. It speaks for itself. And Arkansas, which has gotten probably better, or will be better this year than even what they were last year, and they were pretty good. So, and I think personally, Chad Kelly has the capability of being better than Bo Wallace, and for Ole Miss's sake, being probably more consistent. And if that's the case, LSU's going to have a pretty tough road to go 4-0 in that month, because then they got A&M to finish the season in Baton Rouge after they face Ole Miss. So I would be really concerned right now if I'm an LSU fan, or if I'm any of the opposing team fans in the SEC West right now, because I think Ole Miss could make a push, especially after what I saw with the Auburn Tigers against Louisville. I wasn't that impressed with Jeremy Johnson as I was with their defense. But Ole Miss, on the other hand, if Chad Kelly can perform to the level of how he performed against Tennessee Martin when he gets in the league play, I think he could end up being a better quarterback than Jeremy Johnson from the passing perspective.
Chad, guest host Michael Snowden. Real quick, want to ask you, what do you think will happen with the Lightning situation with LSU last night, and how that'll affect them down the road, playing one less game than everyone else due to the weather situation, and how it'll affect the outcome of the season?
I think, personally, in the 30 years that I've followed college football since the mid-'80s, within the last probably half decade or more, I have seen so many lightning delays. Now, maybe not to the extent of a total postponement or cancellation or suspended game as LSU McNeese were last night, but I think we've gotten to play this thing out a little bit too much. We've had 3 games yesterday. Think of it this way. UL Monroe and Georgia played in the 11 o'clock window. Then you had Tennessee and Bowling Green, which suffered a lightning delay, but they were at 2:30. They played early enough to where, they could have come back 3 or 4, 3.5 hours later if it took that long to finish their respective games at whatever point in their game when they stop. You play a night game, whether it's at 6 or 7 o'clock, LSU known for that. And maybe that's something they need to look at in the month of September. Because, look, in the Gulf South, you got more thunderstorms roaming around as much as you got cats loose on the street, okay? I mean, you got a thunderstorm in the afternoon just about every day. Now, obviously, you would think by 7 o'clock, 6:30 at night that you wouldn't have that problem. But, we are in daylight savings time mode. It's still considered the summer, and it's still very hot. So, by moving the game up to 2:30, would it have maybe gotten in by 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock? If that were the case, who knows? Probably. But I will say this, in regards to the rules that they put forth, the conferences that they agree with, the officials, within a 6-mile radius of the campus or the stadium, they can't, of a lightning strike, they can't continue. They have to evacuate the field. What about the 3 hours that the fans sat in the stadium with this lightning delay that was supposedly, obviously could affect the players on the field, and certainly you don't want anyone struck by lightning. What about those fans that sat in the upper deck and throughout the entire stadium in that 3 hours? They didn't evacuate them, but they evacuated the players, the media, and everyone involved on the field to go either to the press box or the locker room. So to me, they talk out of 2 sides of their mouth. And it took them about 3 to 3.5 hours to tell the fans to seek shelter. Why did they seek shelter at 6:45? Why they waited till 9:45? So I think this is taken to, I'm for player safety, don't get me wrong, but I think they're taking this a little too far. It's almost like a baseball game. We can't play in the rain unless it's a constant rain that's not, a downpour, but we can't play in lightning or rain at all. I'm not suggesting that if I want to see a player get hurt or heaven forbid get killed by lightning, but when something like that out of the ordinary happens, then all of a sudden they want to shut everything down and be overly cautious, I think, in a situation like this. And you do have to have radar and computers and the technology you have to make sure that you do implement some sort of plan. But I think they're taking it too far. I'm going to ask you this question. When was the last time a player got struck by lightning?
I have absolutely no idea, and that's a very fantastic question to ask. I don't even know anybody who's ever been struck by lightning to really answer that question.
I mean, golfers do because they got metal clubs in their hand. And I could understand them wanting to pull the plug on a round of golf or a tournament at whatever given point. But a football player that may have metal cleats on and just being, on the ground level could certainly get hit by lightning. But none of us sitting here can actually say when was the last time a player of any level, high school, college, or pro, got hit by lightning. And that's the point I'm trying to make. If there's lightning within a 3-mile radius of the campus or 4 miles or maybe 2 miles even, if you want to be cautious enough to say, let's head to the locker room, let's get everybody off the field. But within a 6-mile radius, I think is a bit much. I think what's happening, they're talking about attendance right now in college football going down a bit because of cell phones and the internet and maybe not even selling alcoholic beverages as the SEC doesn't do. The kids, the student body getting a little restless at times in games, particularly rental-win games like a Tennessee Martin or McNeese State. But when you start implementing all these lightning delays and so forth, I guess that's why they talk out of two sides of their mouth. If they evacuate the stadium when the first delay happens, then they're afraid they can't get 80 to 100,000 people back in a given stadium. That's the only thing I could think of, which doesn't make any sense because it should be about the safety of everyone, not just the players or the media. And I'm just not for this type of thing because you go back to the days of, I remember back in the early 90s, the Ohio State game in Columbus. They shut the game down in the middle of the third quarter. It was a conference game. I don't remember who they played. And that was a big deal, and it would look dangerous on television. What I saw out there yesterday is like the Georgia game yesterday, like the Tennessee game. I don't see where you have to shut a game down for 30 minutes to an hour because of that. I just...
Yeah, Chad, that's pretty crazy. And, just really quick here, as far as LSU playing one less game, is that going to affect them in any way?
It's hard to say. Obviously, you talk about affecting them. Let's look at the worst case scenario. If they go 5-6, okay, and I'm looking at it from the borderline bowl appearance situation, bowl eligibility. Do you get a waiver from the NCAA if you're LSU? If you were 5-6 at the end of the year and saying, wait a minute, we couldn't play this game because of Mother Nature. These days it seems to be that the NCAA gives a lot of bowl waivers because there's more bowls than we've ever had. But you have to look at that scenario. Could it cost you a bowl appearance? And then in the next breath, if you would somehow miraculously, and I don't believe they will, but let's just say they go 11-0, and does this in say 12-0 with an SEC championship win at that point? And you got these other teams that play conference championship games. Do you fall in the Big 12 game, a Big 12 element where you don't have that extra game? And it's not because of the conference; it's because of a game that was rained out. Granted a McNeese game, but still a game that was on the schedule and one less win you have. So it could affect it. Now, obviously, if they finish anywhere from 6 to 10 wins, at the end of the day, it won't have any bearing. But yeah, it could affect some kind of way. It would be interesting to see, depending on how the season plays out.
All right, Chad. Now let's talk about the rest of the SEC. Were there any games or any teams that caught your eye?
I would say the Texas A&M performance against Arizona State. I just finished watching the replay. I saw most of the game last night, but there were a few areas I wanted to look at again to see what Chavis is bringing to the table. I don't like the way he left LSU. I thought he could have done it in a better way. I thought he was a little selfish, in my opinion, towards the team. Whatever his feelings were with Les Miles and Joe Lever, that's different. But in any event, he's over there now, and I think he doesn't quite have the talent that he would be accustomed to at his days at LSU and certainly his better teams at Tennessee back in the day. But they did some things against Arizona State, and I don't know how good Arizona State really is. They may not really be the 15th ranked team in the country going into the season, and it proved that last night. So I don't know how much better A&M is going to be until they get in conference play, in my opinion. But I was impressed with the way they played, only giving up 17 points, and obviously with that offense scoring 38. So I was impressed with Chavis's guys there, Myles Garrett, and of course, the rest of the crew there at A&M. He's got some quality defensive ends.
Okay, Chad. All right. Well, I guess that wraps up our SEC discussion. We want to thank you for being on the show with us this week, and we will catch up with you later down in the season, especially for that Ole Miss LSU game.
Absolutely, and hopefully by then we'll have something really good to talk about for both teams.
Sure, absolutely. All right, that's Chad LaBorde from the Louisiana State Roar Show. We're going to come back and we'll talk a little bit more about Fresno State, the team that's coming into Oxford next week. We'll be right back on Hotty Toddy Hotline. And welcome back to Hotty Toddy Hotline. Ron Suggs with Michael Snowden here. Michael, the Ole Miss Rebels have a big game coming up this Saturday against Fresno State. Their last, I guess you call it, tune-up before they take on Alabama in SEC play. Let's talk about the Fresno State Bulldogs. They are led by quarterback Zach Greenlee over the win over Abilene Christian last Saturday. Greenlee threw 14 of 32 for 156 yards and 3 touchdowns. They're also led by running back Martez Waller. Waller rushed for 154 yards on 22 carries in the win over Abilene Christian. Michael, Fresno State, they are out of the Mountain West Conference. They actually played Ole Miss. I believe it was the last year of the Houston Nutt era, and where Ole Miss went to Fresno, played them out there. Certainly Ole Miss is going to be favored in this football game. Coming up on Saturday at 2:30 at Vaught Hemingway Stadium. But what are your thoughts on this Fresno team?
Well, Fresno, they're not going to be too much of competition for Ole Miss. No offense to any Fresno State fans out there, and just mostly because Ole Miss is a top 25 team, and Fresno State's not. But it should be a good matchup, Western team versus a Eastern part of the country team. It's obviously not going to be UT Martin, though. They're going to be better than that. Ole Miss will have to be a little bit more better prepared than that. And I think that the defense will do what it does, but it'll be interesting to see how a good defense plays against Chad Kelly and the rest of the Rebels. It will also be interesting to see if Laquan can get back on track. First game back, you expect something out of that. But hopefully we can see Laquan make 1, 2, 3, maybe a couple plays, or at least just get a touchdown. You want to see Laquan get back to where he was, get him on track, and then move forward from there.
Ole Miss, they're taking on Fresno, a team that's better than UT Martin for sure.
For sure.
So, what are some things? I mean, it's hard to really complain about scoring 76 points and only
5th highest in school history.
Yeah, and only giving up 3.
Wow.
But overall, I mean, what improvements do you think Ole Miss should make in this game against Fresno?
I get Laramie back. That's about all you can say. I mean, really just figure out your QB. I really think you don't have to have the guaranteed quarterback yet. At least have Chad, official the starting quarterback, I think, after this game. Because you want to have this is who it is, we're sticking with this regardless, if there's injuries. But just, I think, have a more focused attitude, probably. Obviously, Ole Miss was focused when they played UT Martin, see the score. But now you got to treat Fresno as probably an SEC East opponent. If we were playing South Carolina, I think that would be a good matchup. They've got the threat, but if you stay focused, you do what you need to do, you should probably get the win.
Fresno State out of the Mountain West, they're a team that they make bowls all the time, so they're going to be a very competitive football team. They had former quarterback Derek Carr, who now is the starting quarterback for the Oakland Raiders in the NFL. So it's a team that they have an offensive system of throwing the football, and they're a team that is going to air it out a lot, also have a strong running back in Martez Waller that I mentioned earlier. So it's going to be, a bit of a test. Ole Miss is not going to score 76.
No,
I mean,
sure.
they might score 40, possibly 50, but we'll just have to see. But I mean, overall, Michael, what I'm trying to figure out is the running back situation. I mean, 5 backs played, but that's not going to happen in every game.
For sure.
So I think you got to figure out which 2 or 3 are going to be your go-to guys every game. Figure it out in this game. In my opinion, I think it's going to be Jalen Long, Jordan Wilkins, and Akeem Judd. But I mean, obviously, you can't rule out Eugene Braisley and some other backs on the team. So,
well, we're for sure going to see Jalen. I mean, there's no doubt about that. Of course, Jalen's going to be in there.
So I want to see that. I want to see the backs continue that push. That they rushed for about 338 rushing yards in the win over UT Martin. So I mean, personally, I think if the backs can run well, you figure out the starting quarterback, hopefully get Laramie and some linebackers back, then I think you'll have some good rhythm, good momentum going into Alabama.
Chemistry, yeah, you definitely want. I mean, you have to come fully ready. I mean, you don't want to overlook. That's what a lot of what Hugh Freeze said last year. You don't want to overlook a team, and that kind of happened with Memphis last year before they played Bama. Ole Miss only won 24-3. That score does not. It was 16.
And it was a close game.
It was. I mean, it was not. I think Ole Miss was only up 17-3, and Memphis almost ran back a 90-yard return had there not been a flag. So it could have been a better game, closer game. But you want to get this focused win, then you can look at Alabama. Then you gotta be ready.
Well, we're gonna take a break, and when we come back on Hotty Toddy Hotline, we will wrap up the show and look around some more Ole Miss sports and around the SEC for this week. Stay with us on Hotty Toddy Hotline.
Hey, Rebels, your truck is here. Allen Samuels Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram in Oxford presents the all-new Ram Rebel. It's Ram, the Rebel way. Send an unmistakable signal. Rebel 24/7. Ram Rebel from your friend in the car business. Allen Samuels Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram in Oxford.
Come by, let's be friends.
And welcome back into Hotty Toddy Hotline. We want to take a moment and thank our sponsors that make this show happen at Charter Road Hospitality, and we'd like to thank the Hampton Inn, right over here, right in the conference center, and right where we are here at the Town Place Suites in Oxford. They certainly have a beautiful, one of the newest hotels here in Oxford, and also over on Jackson Avenue. There's another Hampton Inn right by the Huddle House and the Holiday Inn Express as well, and they're building a new Courtyard Marriott here in Oxford too. So there's going to be a lot of great things, great hotels. Charter Road Hospitality doing great things, and we'd like to thank them. And come stay if you're coming for a game or just a visit to Oxford. They certainly will take great care of you. Continental breakfasts and coffee 24/7. So, all right, Michael, let's look around Ole Miss sports. Ole Miss volleyball participated in the North Carolina State tournament last weekend, defeated the Wolfpack on Friday in 5 sets, and then swept Delaware and Jacksonville. And, this is a team, Audrey Edie, Nikita Clare, Steve McRoberts picked up his 500th win this past week. I mean, I think Coach McRoberts is doing some big things for Ole Miss volleyball. They are 7-1 this season. Had a little tough loss to Tennessee Martin this past week in 5 sets. But overall, I mean, I think women's sports at Ole Miss, and we'll touch on soccer in a second.
Right.
You look at volleyball with Coach McRoberts, soccer with Coach Matt Mott, basketball, and friend of the show, Matt Insel. They're doing some big things.
They are. It's fun to watch. I hopefully we'll be able to get to a volleyball game coming up pretty soon. They're a good team, 7-1 as you said with their record, going off getting that little tournament. That's good to get. And the women's soccer team, great. Led by CC Kaiser, she's playing really well. They're playing really well too, and it's really fun to watch. But women's basketball should be a good season coming up. But it's fun. It really is.
Volleyball finished 22-10 last season. Just missed the NCAA tournament. Started 15-0 on the season, Michael. Now let's talk about soccer. They had a tie on Friday against the 19th ranked Central Florida Knights. It went to the last minute, 120th minute. But I mean, overall, they have some solid players with Matty Freeman, Bethany Bunker. You mentioned C.C. Kaiser. Overall, I mean, they got to do better in SEC play.
Oh, for sure.
They made the NCAA tournament 2 years ago with Rafael Souza, who now actually played in the World Cup this past year for Brazil. So, I mean, overall, I mean, how do you think the soccer team will fare?
I think they'll do well. They're focused. They look like they've. I've talked to a few of the players. They are very focused on the season. Workouts are going very swell, and they seem to really be into the season this year and really have a set goal of what they want to do. So it should be a very fun season.
Let's go around the SEC, recap what happened over the weekend, Michael. South Carolina gets a win over their in-state rival, North Carolina, the Tar Heels. They had a fourth-quarter comeback, won that one 17-13. Steve Sprayer still barely is hanging on there.
Yeah, he's in there. It depends on who you ask, but that was an interesting game, I say for sure.
And the only team in the SEC that did not get a victory was
Vanderbilt.
Because our friends in Nashville, the Commodores, lost to Western Kentucky 14-12. They had a 2-point conversion that was failed at the end of the game. Tough times for Derek Mason.
Well, it's tough. I mean, Vanderbilt, it's not been legendary that they've been a great team, and it's I feel bad for Vanderbilt fans. It's going to be a tough year for them, but they've got a heck of a baseball team. So
you can always look forward to baseball.
Exactly. So they've got that in mind, but there's just not too much to expect with Vanderbilt.
We talked about Ole Miss beat UT Martin 76-3. Georgia got a win over Louisiana Monroe. They won that one 51-14. Nick Chubb for the Bulldogs had a really big game as he had 120 yards, 2 touchdowns for Georgia. Arkansas beats UTEP 48-13. Auburn barely defeated Louisville 31-24. Jeremy Johnson, shaky play for Auburn.
It's going to be a very interesting season for Auburn. People were saying they are going to be an incredible team and that they can win the SEC. I even saw a blogger on ESPN or something like that mention that they would go 12-0.
Yeah.
No. I think it's going to be a very interesting year in the SEC West, and I honestly believe it's open for everybody for the taking. I think anybody except State, or with the exception of A&M, can win it. But they impressed me as well, very much. So.
Mizzou beat Southeast Missouri 34-3. Tennessee gave up 30 points to Bowling Green, but they still beat them 59-30. Kentucky knocks off UL Lafayette 40-33. Arizona State falls to A&M. You just mentioned 38-17. Florida beats New Mexico State in Jim McElwain's first win as a Gator, 61-13. Wisconsin falls to Alabama, 35-17. Alabama played really well.
Bama looked tough.
Yeah,
Bama looked tough. I mean, I was watching that game last night, trying to find some weaknesses in Bama, and there's not too many of them. They have a lot of penalties, though. I did notice that. If Ole Miss can force Alabama to make penalties with that defense, that could really be a factor in 2 weeks.
And lastly, our friends down south, Mississippi State. Friends, of course. They defeat Southern Miss in Hattiesburg 34-16.
Down 10-7 at halftime.
That was closer than the experts projected. Let's just say that.
Yes,
all right,
sir.
Well, Michael, that wraps up Hotty Toddy Hotline for today. For this week, and we will see you next week as we will recap Fresno State, and we're going to preview the Alabama game. For our executive producer, John Rawl, Michael Snowden, Browning Stubbs, this has been a production of CRM Sports on the Colonel Reb Radio Network. We'll see you soon.